Hi, Andy. Welcome to the podcast. Great pleasure to have you.
Hi, Fabian. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into the topic of today, which is, of course, Gen AI, let's learn a little bit more about yourself. Um, Maybe if you wouldn't mind just starting with your current role, responsibilities, and you've, of course, worked with a number of exciting technology companies, and wouldn't mind just expanding a little bit on your specific engagements with them. That would be awesome.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I recently moved to a new company called Patty Labs. It's a defense company. We focus on mostly uh, air defense and technologies around it, but not necessarily on bending metal. It's mostly software related. And as you
Hmm.
can imagine, when you talk about software, the generative AI, machine learning, they all come into the picture. Prior to that, actually quite recently, for the last 2 years, I work at AWS. Was the senior solution architect at the worldwide scale. So I had a chance to work with really large organizations such as BMW, Toyota, a lot of auto manufacturers and OEMs, as well as partners of AWS who were involved in designing software, making solutions for automotive, and participating in a lot of exhibitions, including CES and one in Munich on Embedded World. So I had a chance to really, kind of be really close to not just
Hmm.
makers, also users, and
Yeah.
see where the technology is heading and what people are really asking for. 25 years in IT, so a lot of other companies that I had a chance to or pleasure to work with, including Microsoft. I worked closely with Azure team, and I was involved with the wider scale distribution of systems such as SharePoint and other technologies that Azure had. And prior to that, I worked for multiple other companies. I work at other defense companies who were involved
Hmm.
in building drones. One of them, interestingly, was for NASA. The project was called Ingenuity. It's a helicopter that was uh, deployed in Mars, and was kind
Oh,
of interesting with sending data back home. So yeah, I mean
yeah.
it's been quite a journey.
Sounds fascinating. So many topics to dive into. Let's start with the state of Gen AI more broadly. Whenever I talk to any technology leader at the moment, Gen AI seems to be on top of mind. Do you feel it's just a fad, or is there something to the hype of Gen AI across industries at the moment?
No, actually, it's actually a fact. Initially, when I was actually at AWS when the whole hype started. AWS was a little bit behind in terms of AWS had a lot of history in AI ML. I
Hmm.
wanted to declare that probably one of the leaders in AI ML, but kind of l- left behind when it came to the generative AI aspect of things. And
Hmm.
whole thing started with um, the intention process in actually kind of training your model in a different
Yeah.
way. And ChatGPT, of course, was the ChatGPT 3 was really the one that took everybody by storm. And gradually, everything at AWS turned into generative AI. I remember last year, literally every team at AWS was refactoring or moving into generative AI and machine learning to make sure that we can catch up.
Hmm.
So several interesting products have been developed. I was part of actually the Q, which is AWS flagship product that you can use different models and kind of like a managed service that you can use GenAI. And because of that, I had a chance to work really closely with a lot of industry leaders, not
Hmm.
just automotive, people who actually were helping automotive industry to provide services. I'm talking about like ERPs and companies like SAP and companies who provide site services. Like when you make your car, it's not just making it; you have to also sell the car. And aside there's the whole new channel got introduced in terms of how we can capture sales, how we can capture customer requirements, because uh, there is no longer a lot of improvement in terms of engine or
Hmm.
even EVs. We can capture a lot of those technologies up to the bleeding edge almost anywhere you want.
Hmm.
But then when it boils down to really how the experience is going to be with customers, it touches the heart of generative AI.
Hmm.
Because again, you can inference, you can train the model based on what your customers are asking for, and then inference from it on how they really a vehicle should perform. And I can give you multiple samples. So yeah, I mean, that was a long answer to your question, but yes, it is. It's actually a fact, and it's picking up big time everywhere, from manufacturing to design, from customer maintenance to even navigation. There are companies that I had a chance to work with. In fact, a few months ago, I was at GTC, the NVIDIA. graphic technology, and it was a conference, and it was there were a couple of companies that came by and said, well, we are using now generative synthetic data to train our models for navigation, which is a kind of new thing. We used to as scientists, we used to build these models and then train, like, OpenCV, feed them a lot of videos and graphics to train the model
Yeah.
on how a car should navigate. Not anymore. It's all data driven now. You don't have to spend time, months or even years. You can very quickly create synthetic data, train your model. And there was a truck company actually who said they got certified just by using synthetic data using generative AI. So
Wow.
yes, it's real. It's real and it's happening.
That's fascinating. I would definitely talk about use cases. I would love to talk about use cases in a moment. Let's talk about some of the journeys, the Gen AI journeys that you've seen amongst, of course, industrial companies more widely, but then potentially also, if you've got insights into that, amongst some of the automotive incumbents. How have you observed that some of these incumbents approach Gen AI as a topic?
That's a very good question. So, I mean, being part of the worldwide group, I had a chance to travel a lot last year and year before. And each company approach it differently. Again, depends on the countries that the company is located. Some companies are taking, and I don't want to name any specific company because just to respect them. The decision is theirs. They are making cars. They are treating their own customers. They have their own customer base. So I'm assuming that they know what they are doing with their customer. But there are companies who are taking it very cautiously, and there are companies who are actually taking it head on because they want to stay leader and be the leader. And as you can see, the instance in terms of like, what am I going to use in my vehicle depends on what is safe, of course, because in a vehicle, we are talking about safety critical aspect of the vehicle. You don't want a generative AI to make a wrong decision and put your life in danger. So I can go on and explain exactly the different aspect of how generative AI been observed and utilized. But yes, I mean it all varies depending on each OEM. I couldn't really see each one piggybacking or copying anybody else.
Mm. Staying on this organizational level, you were instead of course, an external partner to some of these large organizations. There currently seems to be, I guess, first of all, which was a part of the origin of this podcast, is that there isn't a playbook for Gen AI in the automotive context, which might never exist. But what we currently see, at least from my experience, is quite different approaches when it gets down to this element of making versus buying, and also the level of commitment to external partners. How do you think this dynamic will play out? To what extent do you think some of these incumbents will actually insource capability or will rely on slash partner with some of these companies over the long term?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So as you said, like as you said, it's like there's no real playbook yet out there for the automotive industry. But if you go back one step of what I just mentioned before, is like data is a king, and the companies who've been able to gather a lot of data, they can actually kind of extract one of the existing models. Let's say, for example, we have Llama 3 now, and interestingly, even Nvidia's team went on public and said, well, we are using these pre-existing models and then we are fine-tuning it to do different stuff for us. For example, they design chips, they design circuits. For many different things, these multi-models can be trained and used. But again, you have to have your own data in order to fine-tune it. And we can go to more technical details if needed, but it's buying versus really having your own depends on the time to market. If there's a demand by the customer, which you can still evaluate it by generative AI and sentiment analysis of
Yeah.
large amount of data, feedbacks from the customer, and you see that this actually can hamper your production or hamper your market share, then by all means, I think it makes sense to invest and buy what is out of shelf available to some degrees. But I believe that the pioneers of the future are companies who think now. They're not afraid, and they start gathering data from the existing cars, from buying it from available sources, and I start thinking of how I can fine tune, make it more suitable for my customer.
That's fascinating. Let's talk, if that's okay, specifically about some of the new entrants in this space that offer LLMs. for two external companies. For example, OpenAI, you mentioned it, very popular with a GPT 3.5, now 4.0. Do you think companies will continue to use these models? And if so, why? Or do you think they will develop their own LLMs internally?
That's a very tough question. Unfortunately, I don't have that glass ball to predict future. It's moving so fast that one of my nightmares is the waking up every day and say, "Oh, if there's chat GPT-5 out there, and I have no idea how it's really utilizing data." So it's moving too fast now. But that's a good observation. Eventually, I think if you look at the cost of developing this LLM, some of them require massive amount of data. You're talking about like billions of tokens. And
Mm,
I came up with a very easy calculation. Like if you want to develop something like ChatGPT 3, you're looking at, or 4, you're looking at hundred, if not more, millions of dollars to develop the existing LLM model and use. But the caveat here is, do really companies who are manufacturing cars need all of those data? So they might
mm,
come back and say, you know what, a lot of this is great if I'm doing if I want my car to make decisions in terms of different situations, like I'm driving and suddenly it's snowy and the road is off road and I have no idea, never been trained, then a multi-model, very expensive model might be really lifesaver. Aside to that, 90% of the time you are within this proximity or vicinity of something that a model that you don't need a ton of data. So it makes
mm,
sense that eventually that these companies, when they have enough data, of course, develop their own LLM. And then out of these auto manufacturer, probably one pioneer will come up and say, hey, I spend a lot of my time. I have international spread. I can help you. Instead of you guys go there, get the data first, which takes a lot of time. And
mm,
then, and again, the compliance and all of these issues, legals in Europe and United States, you can imagine privacy. This is a big concern that has to be addressed, for data acquisition. But if it's done, that company provides that LLM, I think they are going to be major uh, pioneers or major, I would say, leaders in that area.
mm. That's fascinating. You, of course, mentioned data there a couple of times. Let's talk about data for a moment. What are some of the
Right.
pitfalls you've seen, and what are some of the risks that companies need to mitigate when it comes to the development of GenAI solutions, either for internal use or for customer-facing solutions?
Yeah, again, we have to really kind of silo this in different contexts. If that LLM is used for cars to navigate properly, like segment the road, stop traffic signs, pedestrian, and be able to uh, kind of drive the car autonomously, that's a different story. But there are other areas of LLMs that can be developed for different purposes. I can give you a sample. For example, an LLM that is used for for just using your car. Like when you buy a new car, normally we have to spend some time find the knobs. I remember once I was in Munich attending a conference, and I had really hard time finding to turn the headlight, the high beam off. And I've been actually stopped by police. The police came to me and said, Did you get this car today?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I just got this car today. I really don't know how to operate it properly. Maybe I should have spent a little bit more time making sure that I know how it perform before I start driving it." But our expectation of driving a car is that if you know how it works, right? We have to know the knobs, we know the high beam, we know the low beam. It's general with most cars, but it wasn't the case at that time. So
Mm,
if an LLM is there and I can just ask the LLM, "Hey, I don't know how to operate this. Help me quickly."
mm,
First of all, is it high beam or low beam? And then the LLM can go there through the whole manual and then help me find the knobs, or even maybe in a safe way, not of course breaking or something like that. Help me to operate some of those functionalities. Then that's a really good data to gather right now and help our customers with it. I can give you another quick sample too. Like when my car tire inflation warning sign comes up, I have sometimes challenged to find out what is the best pressure that I have to provide. I have to go
mm,
find the label. Sometimes it's on the door, sometimes it's not on the door, and it's a challenge. So again, it could be really easy. Doesn't even need LLM. You just provide it in a way that you can converse with your vehicle and ask questions. And I think that's something that it should probably be there. It doesn't cost a lot. We have already, most cars already have audio um, processing power right now. You can, even on your phone, and that's something we can start with. But again, as you mentioned, like data is the king. and then you need to gather data. If data is used for, I would say, autonomous navigation, that's a bigger issue,
Mm.
because again, if a car is sold internationally, and I don't want to bring names, but there were cars that were certified to drive autonomously in different countries,
Mm.
and they didn't have enough training in their machine learning process to know there's a truck actually in front of it, and then just went
Mm.
right through it. So that's data. If we have enough data and we have those data available, I think that's going to be really gold nuggets to provide.
Mm. What are some of the other risks? Of course, data, we've spoken about it. Do you see any other risk when it gets to the development of these solutions?
Well, again, yeah, I mean, it's every time I go and talk about, at different seminars, people come up and ask, how about hallucination? And there are risks
Mm.
in that area, because again, at the moment, most of the data that you are getting for our large language models are coming from the internet, and as you can imagine, there are a lot of inaccuracies. They're not moderated, they're not properly set, and then we try to use something called RAG, which uses our own existing data to make sure that it's actually verified, then
Mm.
generate response back, which helps a lot. But still, we are not at 100% accuracy yet. So that's one thing. Other thing is like privacy. What is how the model is used, how they are trained, how are we going to use training in a safe way? And as you can see, there are a lot of lawsuits going around for these companies who are providing LLMs in different aspects, like music, for example. Two companies now asked to shut down.
Mm.
So there are risks. There are definitely risks around it. I would say the sooner we can define, especially for lawmakers, define what is the boundaries of training model, because we don't want to block everything too. We want to provide safety, and I think Europe has this already as a mandate, that you want to have no fatality in our roads utilizing these technologies. There's already I'm part of the consortium that is for safe drivers. I'm helping them with content, with technologies, with demos. In fact, actually, I was invited by Intel to provide a driving monitoring system for a vehicle based on Amazon technology, to show how we can actually safely monitor very cheaply without expensive equipment at the driver level of attention, and be able to mitigate that if the driver is impaired or something, even if the driver is passing out for some reason.
Mm.
So that's
Just,
basically.
just on the aspect of regulation, we, of course, in Europe, we've got the AI Act now in place, and fairly recently, which
Yep.
is really it's a good step, arguably, in the right direction. But many companies I've spoken to say that loads of the definitions, descriptions, they're quite vague, similar to GDPR a couple of years ago,
Yep.
where they still wait for lawsuits for cases to provide specificity in terms of what it actually means. I guess there are some inherent risks. First of all, legislation, just given the sort of process, is always lacking behind innovation in a way, one could argue potentially. And then secondly, if it's not specific enough, is there something that needs to change in the process of creating these regulations? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very sensitive subject, because again, it comes when we look around it get intermingled with a lot of other things, politics and regulations, and what really is considered private and non-private is the face. And then you can see in Asia we have different regulations, and in Europe we have different regulations, and the United
Yeah.
States we try to catch up with that too. But overall, to answer that question is, I think we have to put common sense at the very beginning of these regulations, making sure that if we can save lives, and this private data can somehow get purged and cleaned, but is still used for the good of mankind. And I can give you a couple of other samples, like healthcare. Yes, I don't want my health data to be shared publicly, and it should be private, and it's only owned by me. But at the same
Mm.
time, if my genome pattern can help predict some other things, some other diseases, and save lives long before it becomes an issue, by all means, I think there should be a proper mechanism or checks and balances
Mm.
in place to accommodate that. Same thing for roads. I think it's enough is enough. We had enough uh, uh, um, losses in just for no reason, because people use their phone and then he killed somebody
Mm.
else's loved ones. We have the technology today, and we should really think seriously about implementing those values. Privacy aside, That's, I think, comes first.
That does make a lot of sense. Let's circle back to the element of the organization and specifically the workforce. You, of course, are a partner to a number of organizations. How do you think the rise of Gen AI will change the required talent pool internally? I guess initial those are, of course, in the sort of data science, data engineering space. But for Norse, what do you think are sort of the medium to long-term implications of this rise?
So, I mean, I know that there has been a lot of discussion around people losing their jobs. There has been a strike. There have been rallies. There has been a lot of political discussion about it as well. But overall, you have to understand that, like any other technological revolution, it can happen, and there will be displacement of certain jobs. Anything that a computer can do right now, like if you are using computers to control it, I'm talking about drones. I'm talking about autonomous vehicle driving. In a game, you can literally fly a jet. So if anything that can be done through a computer screen will be changed in just a matter of time, will be changed soon. And it will be replaced by a generative AI controlled mechanism. Could be a robot that not cleans your room, or maybe a security guard that walks around. And this, of course, a lot of jobs will be obsolete. But I don't think that is going to eradicate human interactions, because we still have a lot of things that requires innovation, requires original data that we produce. As we know, LLMs are still although they are generating, they're still learning from past data. So and then they need maintenance and other things too. So yes, there is going to be a lot of changes in a workplace. I don't know if I call it unfortunate, because with every revolution, humankind survived. We came up with different ideas. We introduced new jobs. We introduced new training. And I think as long as we stay nimble and open to change, we should be fine.
That leads me to a follow-up question around the current state of Gen AI in some of these organizations. Potentially a little bit of a controversial, provocative statement, but what I've seen and heard a lot is that loads of organizations identify use cases for Gen AI, launch proof of concepts, some of them scale, most of them don't, but hardly any live up to the initial promise that has been defined in the original business case. First of all, question, I guess, to you, have you made that same or similar experience? And if so, why? And then there might be some follow-up questions to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I would say a lot of people are trying to experiment. Some people are trying to just use it as use the hype to create momentum for the company, to just to say that, hey, we at least we are considering it. But no, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of technologies out there that are not yet suitable for public, and they're unfortunately getting released. Um, Even when we come to some sort of inferences, I was actually at an educational conference for generative AI, and the whole idea was to replace, or maybe at least be an assistant to teacher, and that's something we use every day. I use internet to learn new things, and if generative AI can remove all of these noises I get out of ads and provide me with real content, that would be really useful. But when you spend a little bit of time with it, you can see, okay, it's still pruning data needs a lot of work. Like what is real data, what is not fake data, and a ton of like this fake education, fake content, fake news is bombarding internet or bombarding our content. And it's not the fault of people who are trying to provide generative AI. It's just the time that it takes to put technologies in place that be able to understand what is deep fake, what is real. How can we really attest or certify? And when you work with the defense and army, that's even bigger issue, because now, army is not just about a kill chain. Army talks also about protection, search and rescue, and you want to be able to. And these resources are very scarce. You don't want to spend like a few $1 million airplane in the sky for a wrong reason. So again, this comes to the point that are we thinking at least of a cycle that has human in loop, software in loop, and hardware in loop to be able to refine this? And if this refining process is well defined, so it's really not going, not just looping for no reason, is actually finding, improving, learning from the mistakes. to improve that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are going to see a lot of mistakes and misfires and false positives along the way. The more that we have regulations to limit the impact, like for example, for a car that is driving autonomously, it should not drive in a certain urban area that population is too dense, because we don't want to put people at risk. And I can see that Europe already has a lot of this in place, even for pollution.
Mm.
Like, driving in certain area, you have regulations for what type of car you can drive there. Why not with what type of LLM you can run there? So yes,
Mm.
there has to be some regulations. I think we are everybody's falling behind because it's too new. It's moving too fast. Our lawmakers are still struggling with what really law need to be in place, and then our policymakers at the large organization, our hyperscalers, are still struggling with what services need to be defined. So it's a learning process at the moment.
Mm. Throughout our conversation, you mentioned a number of use cases such as autonomous driving. You mentioned customer experience improvements. Thinking about some of these and more examples almost on a timeline into sort of shorter term use cases that organizations could potentially develop and successfully scale today, and then some of the ones that are sort of medium term and potentially some use cases that potentially need a little bit more time, whether for, I don't know, technological reasons or others. What do you think are some of the use cases that organizations should focus on in the across time frames?
Yeah, I mean, it's interestingly, when you look at this, some of these LLMs, you can find really good answers to some of these questions. The way that they are trained, for example, like Llama 3 has a chunk of it trained on code. So they went out, looked at a lot of good codes on GitHub or other area. So for
Mm.
developers who are working on, like, especially in automotive industry, for example, if they are working on a software industry or anything that related to code, it provides help. It's an assistant. It's a really low hanging fruit, and I would highly recommend. I mean, any company that's think this is cheating and their employees shouldn't use it, I think they should really turn it upside down. Their employee must use it. If you're not using, generative AI for writing codes and checking quality and checking security and anything about your code, you should be really considered to get trained and use it. So some of
Mm.
these tools, I think we are good enough in a level that can save a lot of time. I would say that this is kind of like a natural path that how things develop. Again, a bunch of data scientists, computer scientists wrote this application, so that was in their head from the beginning. But as we move forward, you can see there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that will not impact safety. I would say, in terms of document creation.
Mm.
I talked about sales. So back in CES, we had I noticed that there are really good separation between two routes as this generative AI can be used. One of them is completely customer facing. Like, I want to buy this vehicle, or I want to make this chair. What kind of technology is available to me to provide me, so I can actually kind of provide like some cues, and it gives me a rough idea, so I can start with. It's kind of like an unblocker for creating creative designs, not replacing, of course, the designers. And then
Mm.
along the way, you can also capture interest from people. Like, say, okay, I have these 5, 6 designs. I don't want to make my car every year to look the same thing. Um, you can actually kind of get interaction with customers without asking them a ton of surveys. So yes, interaction with sales process marketing, which should definitely be in place right now to be able to get closer to the customer without wasting their time on countless surveys and questions. Just see how they interact, where their eyes go. And again, sales process also to follow up. It's kind of like we pass the area of cold callings and emails. It should be in a way that we can proactively target customers that are interested in something and fit them with proper data so they can make decisions. I think that's something that we definitely can use right away. In other area that I noticed that, as you're asking, since which areas can actually, which else can be done, I would say in engineering and manufacturing, like, again, focusing on
Mm.
automotive. I've seen companies who are using it to design their ergonomic chairs, like, how really the person should really use the chair. And some of the cars that we are making currently are pretty bad. Like, you sit in a car, sometimes you drive a few hours and you feel that your back is aching and it's not really ergonomically fitting your body. And that can actually help us, like, implementing the design aspect of this for ergonomic view, ergonomic design right away in the process. And this can go on and on. And as we can just bring in more and more, deeper to the production area. Like, Is it optimized? Is it safe and secure? Did I take? Because as a developer, I sometimes don't have enough time or patience to retest my own code. Normally, we
Mm.
send it to another tester, second eye to look at it. But again,
Yeah.
generative AI brings that second person right on, before you have too many loops to go and correct, to tell you, hey, no, we are not following the best practice. This is not secure. Why don't you imply this? And then kind of help us along the way. So these are all the areas, of course, aside from the mighty autonomous driving, that I think will eventually will be replaced by generative AI because of its power of massive multi-models. Now it's considering audio, it's considering video, it's considering segmentation, so it can actually provide something real as we experience as humans. As we drive a car, we're not just looking at the photo, view. We are listening, we are hearing, we are sensing. You feel the bump. We feel a lot of things for driving. We predict, so that should be also eventually be the ultimate goal for automotive industry, I would say.
Mm. Your answer suggested that that we find use cases across business areas and that the successful development of these solutions also requires cross-functional collaboration. Maybe you've made a similar experience that I guess, level of knowledge and experience and capability with regards to Gen AI varies greatly across functions, across organizational levels. And you've also mentioned that you've been involved in education and policy development. What would be your recommendations for individuals developing these internal learning and development programs to upskill their workforce for Gen AI?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'm going to start with actually kind of admiring a few companies because they really started this revolution. I started with Meta, Facebook. I think the whole idea of a lot of us use PyTorch, for example, technology that they open sourced. It's almost like everywhere available for us to use. They opened the Meta, for example, opened a lot of their models that they spend millions of dollars. And the whole idea of sharing, I think, is to understand, is not really limiting them from making money, is opening up new opportunities to develop something that wasn't even possible to develop. As a small person, as a like you know as a maybe the proper wording is like low budget person that wants to get into this area, I would say being able to share what you're learning with other people makes a big difference. Not just it's for greater good, it also helps you to learn more. Now I go teaching because I of course enjoy teaching and talking to people and get their opinion about things, but I learn more myself when I'm teaching people. So it's from early on, I think is important to, when you are developing something around generative AI, and you're fine-tuning a model and you think that you're getting somewhere, you're going somewhere with it. Start with the tendency that sharing is actually with the community is great. So start with that, and we have a lot of platform that they can start learning from and contributing to. Other thing is, I would say start building from early on. You don't have to spend a lot of time on, and I have to be really clear. You don't have to pay a lot of money to AWS or Azure to start building your models. Nowadays, there are so that you can pick up a really small model and then simulate it on your own laptop. It doesn't even have to have GPUs. There are models that actually are fine-tuned for CPU. So even with low budget, start early on, start experimenting with it to get at least get to the understanding of how the gears work, and then what pieces are needed to really make an LLM application. I mean, for this case, we call it SLM, is a small language model, for example, works. And you don't have to go for 70 billion. Just go for small pieces that where your existing machine can accept, and experiment with early on. Just get your hands dirty with it. It helps to broaden your vision in terms of how the pieces would work.
Mm. Last question from my side. If you imagine talking to one of the leaders in large incumbents, data and AI organizations, what would be your top three recommendations to them?
I would humbly beg them to share their data. Let us have access and then learn from the data. There are a lot of countries that have a ton of data in terms of health, in terms of the road conditions, the driving situations that they're not sharing. And I don't think it's helping them or helping anybody else. It's we have to understand that it's a fabric um, of humanity to be able to cover and at least safety. If anything that touches safety, I would definitely ask them to provide anything that they have so far in an open platform.
Mm.
I would promise them here that it will generate more money for them than hiding it back.
Thank you so much, Andy. That's been a fascinating conversation. Your time and insights are much appreciated.
Absolutely, I really enjoyed that too.